We are in the Book of Beginnings, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge, page 49, top of the page. It is the origin and the master clue, a silence overhead, an inner voice, a living image seated in the heart, an unwalled wideness and a fathomless point. The truth of all these cryptic shows in space. The real towards which our strivings move. The secret, grandiose meaning of our lives. So this is an extremely important passage because in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, every person has this living image seated in the heart. None of us are without it. Because the divine presence is in each of us. And we hear this inner voice, or we should aspire to hear it. We should feel this silence overhead. We should know that there is an unwalled wideness and a fathomless point. When something is unwalled, it's totally not enclosed, completely wide. And this point is also fathomless. So in those 4 lines, he has told us all of these things, and then he says, it's the truth of all these cryptic shows in space, these mysterious, puzzling, ambiguous shows in space. And the real towards which our strivings move. The real, of course, he capitalizes the R, which is the real idea, or the supermind. The secret, grandiose meaning of our lives. Now, grandiose in modern usage is somewhat pejorative, but it never was in Sri Aurobindo's time. It always meant something characterized by greatness of scope or intent. So now we have to go through 2 definitions that are extremely important. First, from the Life Divine, we'll look at what Sri Aurobindo tells us about space. And he says, it is possible in pure mentality to disregard the movement of event and the disposition of substance and realize the pure movement of conscious force, which constitutes space and time. These 2 are then merely 2 aspects of the universal force of consciousness, which in their intertwined interaction comprehend the warp and woof of its action upon itself. And to a consciousness higher than mind, which should regard our past, present, and future in one view, containing and not contained in them, not situated at a particular moment of time for its point of prospection, time might well offer itself as an eternal present. And to the same consciousness, not situated at any particular point in space, but containing all points and regions in itself, space also might well offer itself as a subjective and indivisible extension, no less subjective than time. And we, of course, see all of these things in our life as not at all subjective. Time has great meaning to us, importance, necessity, and space also. But these things, Sri Aurobindo tells us, are subjective. The real towards which our strivings move. In the Life Divine again, he says, from our ascending point of view, we may say that the real, capital R, is behind all that exists. It expresses itself intermediately in an ideal, capital I, real idea, remember, supermind. It expresses itself intermediately as an ideal which is a harmonized truth of itself. The ideal throws out a phenomenal reality of variable conscious being, which inevitably draws towards its own essential reality, tries at last to recover it entirely, whether by a violent leap or normally through the ideal which put it forth. It is this that explains the imperfect reality of human existence as seen by the mind. The instinctive aspiration in the mental being towards a perfectibility ever beyond itself, towards the concealed harmony of the ideal and the supreme surge of the spirit beyond the ideal to the transcendental. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says, if one knows him as Brahman, the non-being, he becomes merely the non-existence. If one knows that Brahman is, then is he known as the real in existence. So up till now, even in Shankara's Advaitism, we could understand that Brahman is the real in existence, but we could not become one with Brahman. The Christian theory is that we can know God, but we can never become one with God. Sri Aurobindo said, of course we can, because he is already in us. In the synthesis of yoga, he says, he who is the high and low, the saint and the sinner, the god and the worm, him worship, the visible, the knowable, the real, the omnipresent, break all other idols, in whom there is neither past life nor future birth, nor death, nor going, nor coming, in whom we always have been and always will be one. Wow. Him worship. Break all other idols. The secret grandiose meaning of our lives. And now these lovely lines, a treasure of honey in the combs of God, a splendor burning in a tenebrous cloak. Tenebrous is sort of dark and gloomy. It is our glory of the flame of God, our golden fountain of the world's delight. An immortality cowled in the cape of death, cowled, hooded. Many of the old saints of the Christian churches wore a cowl, kind of cap, hood over their head. So he tells us that it is our glory of the flame of God, our golden fountain of the world's delight, an immortality cowled, covered in the cape of death. The shape of our unborn divinity. He's already telling us that we are going to become divine. Our unborn divinity. And what else does he say? It guards for us our fate in depths within, where sleeps the eternal seed of transient things. Marvelous lines. An immortality cowled in the cape of death. Right now, that's what we are, but not what we will be, because it's the shape of our unborn divinity. It guards for us our fate in depths within, where sleeps the eternal seed of transient things. Transient, passing with time, transitory. Now these lines are just, always we bear in us a magic key, concealed in life's hermetic envelope. Hermetic is, of course, has many, many definitions. But here it's not anything to do with occult sciences, alchemy and the like. It's more unaffected by outward influence or power. So this hermetic envelope of life is concealing this magic key that we bear in us. A burning witness in the sanctuary. He capitalizes witness because it's the divine presence that is in all of us. Regards through time and the blind walls of form. Regards through time and the blind walls of form. A timeless light is in his hidden eyes. He sees the secret things no words can speak, and knows the goal of the unconscious world and the heart of the mystery of the journeying years. This witness, this great witness, this burning witness in the sanctuary, looking through time and looking through the blind walls of form, because form is constricted. When everything is formless, there's no constriction at all. But in order to take birth, one has to descend into a mortal body. And so the burning witness in the sanctuary within us is looking through time and through these blind walls of form. And what else? A timeless light is in his hidden eyes. He sees the secret things no words can speak, and knows the goal of the unconscious world and the heart of the mystery of the journeying years. Well, we can understand now, you see, very clearly that these secret things that we cannot even speak about, he knows them, he sees them, and he is in us. If we are able, even at the lowest point of the spiritual realms of consciousness, to truly step back and look at ourselves, we would also know the goal of the unconscious world and the heart of the mystery of the journeying years. But now Sri Aurobindo says, but all is screened, subliminal, mystical. It needs the intuitive heart, the inward turn. It needs the power of a spiritual gaze. So we have some things to go through here. Subliminal. The dictionary gives us the definition: existing or operating below the threshold of sensation or consciousness. Not too bad. But in the life divine, Sri Aurobindo says, the real subconscious is a nether diminished consciousness close to the inconscient. The subliminal is a consciousness larger than our surface existence. But both belong to the inner realm of our being, of which our surface is unaware. So both are jumbled together in our common conception and parlance. In a letter on yoga, he writes to a disciple, subliminal is a general term used for all parts of the being which are not on the waking surface. Subconscient is very often used in the same sense by European psychologists because they do not know the difference. But when I use the word, and this is a very rare statement, Sri Aurobindo very rarely speaks in the first person. But when I use the word, I mean always what is below the ordinary physical consciousness, not what is behind it. The inner mental, vital, physical, the psychic are not subconscious in this sense, but they can be spoken of as subliminal. It is true that the subliminal in man is the largest part of his nature and has in it the secret of the unseen dynamisms which explain his surface activities. But the lower vital subconscious, which is all that this psychoanalysis of Freud seems to know, and even of that it knows only a few ill-lit corners, is no more than a restricted and very inferior portion of the subliminal whole. And one more from the Life Divine. Our subliminal self is not, like our surface physical being, an outcome of the energy of the inconscient. It is a meeting place of the consciousness that emerges from below by evolution and the consciousness that has descended from above for involution. It needs the intuitive heart, the inward turn. It's figuratively concerning spiritual vision or perception. It needs the power of a spiritual gaze. Else, to our waking minds, small moment look, a goalless voyage seems our dubious course. Some chance has settled or hazarded some will. Or a necessity without aim or cause, unwillingly compelled to emerge and be. Now, very important word here, chance. And I'll take a little time on that, because in his essays, Divine and Human, Sri Aurobindo says very clearly, chance is not in this universe. The idea of illusion is itself an illusion. There was never illusion yet in the human mind that was not the concealing and disfigurement of a truth. And again, in the same essays, Divine and Human, what we call chance is a play of the possibilities of the infinite. And then we had the word will. Some chance has settled or hazarded some will. Now, he says the real motive power of the life of the soul is will. Desire is only a deformation of will in the dominant bodily life and physical mind. The essential turn of the soul to possession and enjoyment of the world consists in a will to delight, and the enjoyment of the satisfaction of craving is only a vital and physical degradation of the will to delight. It is essential that we should distinguish between pure will and desire, between the inner will to delight and the outer lust and craving of the mind and body. And lastly, in the synthesis of yoga, he tells us the leader of the journey, the captain of the march, the first and most ancient priest of our sacrifice is the will. This will is not the wish of the heart or the demand or preference of the mind, to which we often give the name. It is that inmost, dominant, and often veiled conscious force of our being and of all being, tapas, shakti, shraddha, that sovereignly determines our orientation, and of which the intellect and the heart are more or less blind and automatic servants and instruments. Or a necessity without aim or cause, unwillingly compelled to emerge and be. Now, we don't have much from Sri Aurobindo on necessity, but it's very important. Essays in Philosophy and Yoga, he says, necessity is the child of the spirit's free self-determination. What affects us as necessity is a will which works in sequence and not a blind force driven by its own mechanism. What we call necessity is a truth of things working itself out in a time sequence of the infinite. Or a necessity without aim or cause, unwillingly compelled to emerge and be. In this dense field, where nothing is plain or sure, our very being seems to us questionable. Our life, a vague experiment, the soul, a flickering light in a strange, ignorant world. And we'll go on now to the next page. Page 50. The earth, a brute mechanic accident. A net of death, in which, by chance, we live. All we have learned appears a doubtful guess. The achievement done, a passage, or a phase whose farther end is hidden from our sight. A chance happening, or a fortuitous fate. Fortuitous, produced by chance, accidental, lucky. Out of the unknown, we move to the unknown. Ever surround our brief existence here gray shadows of unanswered questionings. The dark, inconscious, signless mysteries. Stand up unsolved behind fate's starting line. So we have enough time, and I could read a letter from Sri Aurobindo on fate. The Indian explanation of fate is karma. We ourselves are our own fate through our actions. But the fate created by us binds us. For what we have sown, we must reap in this life or another. Still, we are creating our fate for the future, even while undergoing old fate from the past in the present. That gives a meaning to our will and action, and does not, as European critics wrongly believe, constitute a rigid and sterilizing fatalism. There is no fatalism in this yoga. There is something that he's going to mention now that I will quote. That gives a meaning to our will and action, and does not, as European critics wrongly believe, constitute a rigid and sterilizing fatalism. But again, our will and action can often annul or modify even the past karma. So our will and action here, and especially our surrender to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, can take away almost all karma. But Sri Aurobindo is going to continue by saying, it is only certain strong effects called utkata karma that are non-modifiable. Murder and suicide. Not modifiable. Mother tells us that anyone who has committed murder or suicide will have to go through 7 additional births to clear away that karma. So I wanted to share that with you. Sri Aurobindo continues, here too, the achievement of the spiritual consciousness and life is supposed to annul or give the power to annul karma. For we enter into union with the will divine, cosmic or transcendent, which can annul what it had sanctioned for certain conditions. New create what it had created. The narrow, fixed lines disappear. There is a more plastic freedom and wideness. Neither karma nor astrology, therefore, points to a rigid and forever immutable fate. And once more, in essays, Divine and Human, fate is God's foreknowledge outside space and time of all that in space and time shall yet happen. What he has foreseen, power and necessity work out by the conflict of forces. And lastly, in Essays in Philosophy and Yoga, this is the great truth now dawning on the world, that will is the thing which moves the world, and that fate is merely a process by which will fulfills itself. An aspiration in the night's profound, seed of a perishing body and half-lit mind, uplifts its lonely tongue of conscious fire towards an undying light forever lost. Only it hears sole echo of its call, the dim reply in man's unknowing heart, and meets, not understanding why it came, or for what reason is the suffering here, God's sanction to the paradox of life and the riddle of the immortal's birth in time. So a paradox is a statement or proposition that seems self-contradictory or even absurd. But it's not absurd, because in reality it expresses a possible truth. And Savitri is filled with paradoxes, because these puzzles, these anomalies, are Sri Aurobindo's way of showing us hundreds of different aspects of the one truth. And the riddle of the immortal's birth in time. Along a path of eons serpentine, in the coiled blackness of her nescient course, the earth goddess toils across the sands of time. We know that when the Divine Mother agreed to take human birth, she had to compress herself to come into a human body. But she also came in as nature. And nature is the earth goddess toiling across the sands of time. Now, Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Life Divine, the faith in the divine Shakti must be always at the back of our strength. And when she becomes manifest, it must be or grow implicit and complete. There is nothing that is impossible to her, who is the conscious power and universal goddess, all creative from eternity and armed with the Spirit's omnipotence. You see, if we pray to the Mother and we are totally surrendered to her, there is no disease that she cannot cure. She may not cure something because that is the nature of the soul's decision to leave the body at a certain point. But if one does not want to leave, and one has that total faith in the power of the Divine Mother, anything can be healed. So we're going to continue on. In the coiled blackness of her nescient course, the earth goddess toils across the sands of time. A being is in her whom she hopes to know. A word speaks to her heart she cannot hear. A fate compels whose form she cannot see. Well, because she is not perfect yet. You see, the earth goddess is experimenting constantly destroying this, building something new. I mentioned a few weeks ago the dinosaurs. When they became unnecessary, the Earth Mother, Gaia, the Earth Goddess, formed new creatures. And she's always doing this, breaking down the old and building up the new. A being, capital B, a being is in her whom she hopes to know. Yes, that's the Divine Mother. She would like to know the Divine Mother. A word speaks to her heart. She cannot hear. Oh, she's so busy with creation and destruction. A fate compels whose form she cannot see. In her unconscious orbit through the void, out of her mindless depths, she strives to rise. A perilous life, her gain, a struggling joy, a thought that can conceive but hardly knows. Arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights. A trembling gladness that is less than bliss invades from all this beauty that must die. So we'll go back a little bit and look at thought and the void. In his letters on yoga, Sri Aurobindo defines the word void. The void is the condition of the self, free, wide, and silent. It seems void to the mind, but in reality, it is simply a state of pure existence and consciousness, sat and chit with shanti. Wow. And in another letter on yoga, he writes, by void is meant emptiness, clear of all contents, except existence, pure and simple. Without that, one cannot realize the silent Brahman. Oh. Out of her mindless depths she strives to rise. A perilous life her gain, a struggling joy, a thought that can conceive but hardly knows. So we do not have that knowledge until we can enter these spiritual realms of consciousness. Even beginning with the higher mind, we can already have it. Not to the extent of the illumined or the intuitive or the overmind, but to some extent. So Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Life Divine, thought in itself, in its origin on the higher levels of consciousness, is a perception, a cognitive seizing of the object or of some truth of things, which is a powerful but still a minor and secondary result of spiritual vision, a comparatively external and superficial regard of the self upon the self, the subject upon itself or something of itself as object. And in his essays, Divine and Human, he writes, "A thought is an arrow shot at the truth. It can hit a point, but not cover the whole target. But the archer is too well satisfied with his success to ask anything farther." All living thought is a world in preparation. All real act is a thought manifested. And lastly, in his essays in Philosophy and Yoga, thought is not essential to existence, nor its cause, but it is an instrument for becoming. I become what I see in myself. All that thought suggests to me, I can do. All that thought reveals in me, I can become. This should be man's unshakable faith in himself, because God dwells in him. And in the letter on yoga, and I'll conclude, our thoughts are not really created within ourselves, independently, in the small, narrow thinking machine we call our mind. In fact, they come to us from a vast mental space or ether, either as mind waves or waves of mind force that carry a significance, which takes shape in our personal mind, or as thought formations ready-made, which we adopt and call ours. Our outer mind is blind to this process of nature, but by the awakening of the inner mind, we can become aware of it. Arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights, a trembling gladness that is less than bliss, invades from all this beauty that must die.